As I watched The Rings of Power, episodes 6 and 7, I was surprised to see that they seemed to be going in the right direction in many ways. Color me shocked. There were some positives to be found, like Celebrimbor finally growing some balls and Sauron working his magic in a potent and visual way. It addressed my complaint from my other review about how we never get to see Sauron actually using his power, like through incantations or spell weaving of any kind. Well, in episode 6, we finally get to see Sauron in action, casting an impressively strong illusion spell over our poor little Celebrimbor with great effect. It's a pretty good scene, which carries over to the next episode and actually impacts the story. He also pulls off a pretty badass move in episode 7. It's a bit late, but welcome nonetheless. Just imagine how much better previous scenes could have been if we'd gotten something like this earlier. Episode 7 has some strong points as well, like some really cool visuals, plus some good interactions between Sauron and the elves. But just when I thought things were getting better, the hacks at Amazon proved they weren't able to help themselves, and ended up stuffing some truly mind boggling story beats and downright questionable direction into the mix, culminating in the most inane, muddled, and pathetically misguided battle scene in Middle Earth's long and storied history, tainting an otherwise decent effort, much like Sauron tainting the Rings of Power themselves.
Every trial that you have met thus far, you have failed.
I'm a bit behind on this show because I was laid low by the flu for a while, so I'm going to speed through episode 6 because it's mostly a lot of setup for the dramatic events occurring in episode 7, where things come to a head outside the walls of Eregion. And let's be honest, I think most of us are here for the battle anyway. The big event that could at least give us some entertainment after a long slog through the twisted forest of corrupted Tolkien lore. With the biggest budget in television history, at least the battle should be good, right? Right?
No!
In episode 6, we're treated to Galadriel enjoying a meal with Adar as they reminisce about Sauron, when Adar pulls out Morgoth's crown like it's show and tell, never mind that it was reforged into a collar for Morgoth's neck after the War of Wrath.
According to law.
But hey, these writers have never let something like the pesky source material get in the way of retelling a substandard version of a far superior story that already exists, have they?
To be able to do what we love and adapt this material at a level like this, where we have so many people who care about it so much, is an absolute joy and a privilege, and we just want to do right by them.
How do you sleep at night?
Adar starts to pump Galadriel for information about the rings and Halbrand's identity, so she tells him everything, including that Elrond is coming from Lindon with an army and her ring, Nenya.
Elrond hastens from Lindon with an army of elves. And Nenya, my ring.
I'm not sure how she knows that. I mean, Elrond might leave the ring in Lindon for safekeeping, or he would if he were smart, but I guess she read the script or something. Galadriel is instantly on board with cooperating with Adar and the orcs to fight Sauron, and somehow Adar is the most logical one in the room, as he rightly points out that the elves will just attack the orcs after Sauron is defeated. It turns out he was just tricking our wise elf maiden in a hunt for information, and she has the nerve to look upset about it.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
Meanwhile, in Numenor, our Pharazôn sentences Elendil to death by Valar, since he refuses to accept Pharazôn as the true king. Just as Elendil is about to do the manly thing and accept the god's judgment, Miriel shows up to steal his thunder. In a stunning and brave sequence of events that absolutely no one saw coming, Miriel is positively affirmed by the sea monster and deemed innocent. Over in the most meaningless storyline, Amazon has decided that they want their own version of Empire Strikes Back and rips off an entire scene from that far better movie. Not Gandalf has a vision of Nori suffering and has to make a decision about staying and continuing his training or going and saving his friends. You know, just like Luke.
Through the Force, things you will see, other places, the future, the past.
The secret fire whispers to us if we have ears to hear. It tells us things, even shows us things.
Han? Leia!
Nori. Snoring? Who's snoring?
Tom Bombadil takes not Gandalf out to choose a staff, but our hapless wizard is concerned about his friends. Tom says that if he leaves, he won't be able to return to this path. So it's a choice between your friends or your training and... You know, I don't even need to describe this scene any further. It's Empire Strikes Back. That's what it is.
Once I know that she's safe, I could return to you.
No. You cannot.
Look, you must complete the training.
I can't keep the vision out of my head. They're my friends, and I gotta help them.
Speaking of the dirty Harfoots, Nori and Poppy are still sitting around in the Stour village, talking about feelings, when we're treated to one of the nastiest kisses ever put on screen.
There, Mark.
Poppy. Do you have lizard for supper?
Why do you ask?
In Khazad-dûm, the dwarves are delving deeper, and King Durin's getting more aggressive. So Disa's solution to the madness is to turn into a Just Stop Oil protester to put an end to the mining.
We're here on orders from the king, so please move. Otherwise, I've no choice but to see you moved.
Apparently, stone singers can summon bats like Bruce Wayne? This scene is hilariously bad. I don't know what else to say. I'm sure this is exactly what Tolkien would have written, if only he'd thought of it first. Good thing these writers are here to come up with these absolute nuggets of literary gold.
I love you.
A lot of episode 6 revolves around Celebrimbor and Sauron, with the Master Smith continuing to work on the rings for men, and Sauron keeping him isolated from everyone else, convincing the other elves that the Lord of Eregion has lost his mind, which they all buy without question. While Sauron is tricking the most gullible people in Middle-earth, the orcs start their siege, and it's the first time the elves have spotted the massive force building up just across the river.
Legolas, what do your elf eyes see?
Sound the bells. We're under attack.
The commander sounds the bells, and elves are panicking and running all over the place. Do these seem like elves to you? You know, once you've been around for a few years, you usually start to take things in stride. You become a bit more stoic, self-restrained. Not these elves. They're just like humans for some reason. Like the showrunner's lack of imagination, maybe? Happily, Celebrimbor finally snaps and figures out that something smells rotten in Stinkville, which is when we get to see a hint of Sauron's power in the form of a large-scale illusion, which is enough to settle Celebrimbor down and keep him working on the rings, all while the orcish siege gathers momentum outside the walls. Oh, and Arondir slaughters some orc deserters in cold blood. Damn, they were already leaving the army, bro. Why do you have to do them like that? And that's episode 6 in a nutshell. Despite my cynical description of it, I didn't find this episode to be all that bad, other than Disa's little protest, which was idiotic. But there were some decent moments between Sauron and Celebrimbor, with the tension ratcheting up. It was probably the most interesting the whole Anatar storyline has been, and the visuals were great as well. The sea monster did look cool, as inconsequential as it felt. The main issue was that there was far too much sitting around and talking, and the episode jumped around from one setting to another, insisting on giving every single character some screen time, which felt cluttered. Overall, it wasn't the worst entry in the season so far, in my opinion, but it did feel slow, overdramatic, and overstuffed. And that brings us to episode 7 and the long-awaited Siege of Eregion. The city's already under bombardment as Celebrimbor is hard at work as usual on the rings, but he started to notice some inconsistencies in the illusion. The orcs, in their military engineering genius, lob a few boulders at a mountain and miraculously knock just enough of the face off to dam the entire river. I mean, I don't think that's how it works, but even if it did, that's some incredible accuracy for creatures that aren't known for their high level of intelligence or engineering acumen. What luck! Now they just have to cross a muddy field under constant arrow fire and assault the looming walls of... What is this place? They call it Eregion in the show, but in the lore, Eregion is a whole region, and the main city is Ostin Edil. Who knows? I don't think the writers know either. We cut to the dwarves who are continuing their mining protest, when Elrond shows up and...
My heart sings to see you, old friend.
You, tidal-haired, flowery-tongued flagpole.
These guys do seem fond of each other, don't they? Not sure what flagpole he's talking about, but...
Durin will come.
Get me the meat and give it to me raw.
Durin will come.
You, tidal-haired, flowery-tongued flagpole.
Durin will come. Durin will come.
Elrond begs for help from the dwarves, and Durin the Younger pledges his aid. I do hope they show up in time.
Durin will come.
So the orcs cross the very muddy field in a head-on assault, which has always been the worst way to take a city historically, and by far the most costly. Never mind that many sieges took years to conclude due to the strength of the defenses and the readiness of the defenders.
Time the bells. We're under attack!
If only Elrond would have sent some people onto the city to warn them of the impending attack, instead of running all the way back to Lindon in episode 5. They might have stood a better chance. It's not like someone couldn't have slipped past the army into the city. Galadriel and Arendir have no problem doing just that. But whatever, the nonsense is just getting started. Speaking of which, the orcs bring up a weapon ominously called the Ravager. This is by far the most idiotic siege engine ever conceived in any medium that I have had the misfortune of seeing. Is it a ballista? A battering ram? No, it's a cumbersome piece of shit with chains you hammer into the wall, which it rips chunks out of in a ballista-like action, like you're firing a piece of the wall away from the wall. This hurt my brain badly. In the long history of siege warfare, humans have come up with a lot of devices, but none so stupid and ineffectual as this. The action is all wrong. It's far more effective to batter walls down or undermine them, not pull at them. Never mind that this pulling action would likely just result in the metal pins coming out much the same way they went in with little collateral damage. If you've ever pulled a nail out of a piece of concrete, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'm not particularly good at physics, but there must be thousands of pounds of pressure acting on those lower stones from all the stone piled above it. It's a pretty stabilizing force, and it's pretty tough to rip things out from such a solid construction with all that pressure being exerted on it. Hence why you batter it down. And that's just the first issue. Don't forget that in any siege situation, the attacker is typically under constant fire by the defenders on the walls. There's no protective cover on this thing whatsoever, so all of the operators would probably be killed in short order. Plus, the chain action required at the base of the wall means that you have to risk more soldiers in the open in the worst place imaginable, where stones and other objects can easily be dropped on the attackers' heads. And then there's a pot of oil dangling off the thing that apparently has no purpose whatsoever except to act as a firebomb for a well-placed shot by a no-name Asian elf sniper in a completely undeserved hero moment. This thing is beyond stupid. At least the hill troll finally figured out how to use it properly before getting killed himself. Nice try, dude. The Assyrians almost 3,000 years ago figured out far better siege weapons than this. Demetrios Poliorcetes, son of Antigonus the One-Eyed, a general and successor of Alexander the Great, came up with all manner of outlandish siege weapons, including a beast called the Helepolis, or City Taker, supposedly armed with no less than 16 torsion catapults and weighing about 160 tons. It wasn't all that successful because it got stuck in the mud, but this was in 305 BC, and people had a pretty good grasp on siege engineering, what would work and what wouldn't, and what would get you killed pretty quickly. Trebuchets, as we see in this show, are actually a pretty advanced piece of weaponry requiring knowledge of counterweights rather than torsion mechanics, which a lot of catapults were based on prior to that. The first counterweight trebuchets in history don't show up until the 12th century AD, relatively late in the Middle Ages, and these orcs are skilled enough military engineers to figure trebuchets out, but are too stupid to understand how a battering ram works. Well, they say characters are only as smart as their writers, and this is a prime example. Are there really no historical advisors on this show? I get it, it's a fantasy show and not beholden to reality, but a little believability goes a long way. Why do you think the Battle of Helm's Deep or Minas Tirith hold up so well 20 years later? Not only are they impressively shot and well choreographed, they make sense in a way that any audience can intuitively relate to. When we see siege towers rolling toward the walls of Minas Tirith and catapults hurling boulders through the air, we instantly get it and can appreciate the scale of what's happening. We see Grond, a massive battering ram that's kitted out in all the fantasy deckings, but still retains that air of believability. It makes sense. A lot more sense than this piece of crap. Believability is a crucial aspect of effective storytelling. This lack of care continues throughout the entire siege, in frustrating development after frustrating development. Just when Elrond and Gil-galad show up to trap the orcs between their cavalry hammer and the anvil of Eregion's walls, the glorious charge is stopped in its tracks when Galadriel is wheeled out to the front. Once again, the worst character in this show is messing things up for us. The entire charge is stopped dead, mere feet from the orcs' lines. Now, I know you know it's not that easy to stop a massed cavalry charge on a dime. Hell, if horses could break on a whim like that, feats of skill like this wouldn't be a thing at rodeos, now would they? It takes time to slow a mass of charging animals like that. Unlike cars, the thing you're riding has its own brain and might not respond as quickly as you might like, particularly when surrounded by a bunch of other charging animals. How the hell are the guys on the flanks going to know to stop anyway? There was no loud command or flag waving to pass the order on down the line, but apparently it works like that in Amazon's world. I mean, no one told the English in Braveheart they should have just stopped, did they? Could have helped. Aside from the physical impossibility of this scene, the battle's momentum and our enjoyment as viewers are also halted in their tracks, while we're treated to a negotiation scene between Elrond and Adar, which goes nowhere except for a kiss between Galadriel and the title-haired one, as he slips her a brooch or something so she can easily escape and wander around the orc encampment until Arondir saves her. I wonder what Celeborn, Galadriel's husband, this guy, thinks of that, since they're supposed to be married and living in Lothlorien at this time. The negotiation scene is pointless and just slows the pace of the battle down, as do the humanized orcs who are oh so concerned for their brethren who might die in battle, and start talking about love? Just stop it. This is utterly ridiculous. Not everything needs to be humanized. Orcs are monsters, cruel and evil. These aren't family men. They aren't misunderstood creatures that we need to take pity on. Not everything needs to be re examined under a modern lens. It's okay to have forces of good and evil in a story about the forces of good standing up to the forces of evil. Anyway, Celebrimbor has figured out that Anatar is actually Sauron, but he's still working on the rings. He finally shows some backbone and chops off his own thumb to escape his shackle. Pretty ballsy move that I can approve of. He smuggles the rings out and gives them to Galadriel, but doesn't want to abandon the city. The episode picks up a bit with Sauron showing some cool powers after Celebrimbor tries to apprehend him, and the hill troll goes on a badass rampage. It takes 3 elf heroes to kill that one troll, by the way. They should have gotten Galadriel out here to deal with it. It would have only taken a few seconds then. Pussies. So the elves have fought their way to the wall for some reason, even though they were behind the orcs to begin with and should have had them pinned against the city. Nice tactics. And then we get more flashy bullshit fantasy fighting. Form ranks, then instantly break them. If you only have a handful of troops, you don't thin the ranks and let them get swarmed by the superior numbers. Now everyone's fighting alone and surrounded. Yeah, that's why you don't break ranks, fucking idiots. Then the orcs pull the rest of the wall down with good old elbow grease. May I remind you of just how many pounds of pressure is acting on those base stones? Each one of those stones probably weighs around 200 to 300 kilograms or more. Think about that. Why couldn't they just stick a tried and true battering ram in there? Adar tosses Elrond away like a rag doll and grabs Nenya from him, because of course you'd bring the precious ring that Galadriel gave you to keep out of the orcs' hands to the battle with the orcs. Good job, buddy. All the strong points of these 2 episodes, like Sauron finally showing his power, Celebrimbor finally pushing back, and some really cool visuals, are wiped away in that nonsensical battle. I was scratching my head at how utterly stupid it was. It's all style over substance, like how Elrond puts an orc on a trebuchet and then fires it at the very city he's there to protect, just because the director thought it would be badass or something. Elrond probably killed a couple elves behind the walls with that stunt. The creators have a complete lack of understanding about what a medieval style battle might look like, how to build real tension, and how to wrap an episode up with a real gut punch to the audience and leave us wanting more. It's all so fake and meaningless. I really did think the show was improving over episodes 6 and 7. I didn't have too much to complain about in episode 6, but that battle in episode 7 just set me off. Hire some better people for battle choreography or something. You're just going through the motions of what you think should look good based on other IPs you've seen, and it feels that way. It feels like a cheap imitation, except it's a very expensive imitation, which is even worse. Bafflingly, the battles in the Peter Jackson films look and feel far better, which were made over 20 years ago and most likely with a smaller amount of money. It's kind of awe-inspiring just how wrong things have gone with this show. Oh, and the dwarves don't come to save the day,
Durin will come.
because nasty old King Durin has taken his axe to the protesters, and so Durin the Younger decides to keep the entire dwarven army back to deal with one man. Yeah, this is about as much of this garbage as I can handle right now. There's only one episode left, thankfully. I suppose the Balrog will make an appearance. Can't wait to see what Amazon does with that.
I trust you are not feeling overwhelmed again.
Quite the opposite.